Hello, I'm Brian Fox. Welcome to my channel. I hate rock music. And this video is going to be a short one, but I thought it was worth pointing out the fact that I'm a big Cactus fan, and I really love the original band with Tim Bogert and Carmen Appice and Jim McCarty and Rusty Day. Definitely one of the all-time great American rock bands. And I was a little lukewarm. I bought the album Hot and Sweaty when it came out in 1972, and it was pretty disappointing for me that the original lineup had disbanded. But a pretty decent lineup with Werner Fritzings on guitar. I think he was in the band Steel out of Texas, and then Peter French from Atomic Rooster and Leafhound on vocals. So they definitely got some top-notch players. And the Hot and Sweaty album, 1972, had I think four uh, studio tracks on it, including Bedroom Mazurka. And they were a worthy band. I wish they'd recorded an entire album of studio material to see what they were truly made of. But those four tracks are pretty good. I understand the pragmatic approach of using the Cactus name to market that new band, and Tim Bogert and Carmen Appice were obviously original members of Cactus, but it was definitely a whole new band. But half of that Hot and Sweaty album, of course, was live, and they did some of the old classics, and they they were respectable, but a completely different band than the original Cactus. But the point of this video is the fact that I wasn't really aware that at the tail end of that second version of Cactus, Werner Fritzings actually left the band, and they had another guitar player, and that guitar player was Ricky Ramirez. And Ricky Ramirez is known to a lot of us collectors because he was in the post Vanilla Fudge Mark Stein band called Boomerang, and he was only 16 years old. And certainly the bright spots on that album were Ricky Ramirez's guitar playing. And then he showed up in a Seattle band called Stryker, and I ended up actually meeting him at a showcase gig that Arista put on for Stryker here in Seattle, and they were pretty much a precursor to hair bands of the late 70s, early 80s. Uh, Pretty decent, standard 80s style rock and roll. But his guitar playing was great with that. And then he ended up in a band called Bruiser in the early 80s that included Paul Frank from Head Over Heels. And on paper, it should have been killer because it was a great lineup of the group, and particularly with Paul Frank from Head Over Heels and then Ricky Ramirez. It should have just been killer, but it actually ended up being pretty average 80s rock. But the big surprise for me was finding out that Ricky Ramirez had actually been in Cactus. And the only reason I found that out is somebody recently posted a Cactus live show from 1972 here on YouTube, and he lists the band's lineup as including pretty much the Hot and Sweaty lineup with Werner Fritzings. But when you listen to the actual show, you hear the announcer tell us who the lineup of the band is, and he said Ricky Ramirez. And so I was flabbergasted, and then I did a little research to find out that yes, indeed, Werner Fritzings left that second version of Cactus in 1972, and they fulfilled the rest of the tour with Ricky Ramirez on guitar. And so now, just accidentally, I come across this live show on YouTube, and it is Cactus with Mach 2 with Ricky Ramirez. And so that's interesting enough to me because I definitely am intrigued by further versions of Cactus. Of course, the most notorious version of Cactus is Son of Cactus, and the only original band member wasn't even an original band member. It was Dwayne Hitchings, the keyboard player on the second version of the band. So Son of Cactus had nothing to do with the original Cactus, but it had an intriguing lineup of its own, including the legendary guitar player singer Mike Pinera from Blues Image and Iron Butterfly, and then Bobby Caldwell on drums from Captain Beyond and Johnny Winterand and Armageddon. And on paper, that band should have been killer. Bobby Caldwell on drums. and Mike Panera on guitar. Um, Unfortunately, that Son of Cactus record is really pretty terrible, and really unfortunate with that much firepower. And this live tape, it doesn't have a super stellar sound quality, but you can hear it, and like me, may enjoy the fact that you get to hear what Cactus sounded like with Ricky Ramirez. And it's not awe-inspiring by any stretch of the imagination, but for us Cactus freaks, it's cool to hear and nice to know that Ricky spent a few months in Cactus and that they tried him out. And maybe if things had worked out differently, they might have ended up recording together as well. But clearly, the Mach 2 Cactus didn't last very long. They probably just fulfilled their touring requirements. But they were obviously serious enough about it, though. However, to record those four studio tracks, which are pretty cool. And I'll say, like I said in the beginning of the video, they took the band seriously, and if they'd had gotten extra serious about it, they would have recorded a full LP, and it might end up being pretty good because songs like Bedroom Mazurka are pretty awesome. Peter French is a cool vocalist, and Werner Fritzing's he's certainly no Jim McCarty, nobody is, but he's a very respectable guitar player, and he puts in a great performance in that Cactus Mach 2 studio stuff. So anyway, who knew? Ricky Ramirez and Cactus. I'm Brian Fox. Thanks for watching I Hate Rock Music.